How are we doing, CPAC? Very good? That's nice to be here. This is my first CPAC, actually. I think it's your third, right?
I believe it's my third, yeah.
Third? Okay,
it's good to be here.
Good to see everybody here. All right, so we've got about 20 minutes here, and I kind of want to start the conversation on it's a 2-year anniversary of a war we've been funding now for 2 years in Ukraine. You've made a lot of headlines in the last couple of weeks with your position on this in the Senate. It's an unusual position. I want to kind of start off with that and just kind of ask you to clarify, what is your position on America's involvement in this war in Ukraine?
Sure. Well, first, Rob, thanks for doing this and thanks for interviewing me. I think that they had me be interviewed because they were worried I'd go on too long and get us off schedule. So here we are. But thanks to all of you for being here, and thanks to CPAC for having me. I mean, my argument is pretty simple. First of all, I think that it is absurd for us to devote so many resources, so much attention, and so much time to a border conflict 6,000 miles away when our own U.S. southern border is wide open. We've got to focus more on our own problems close to home. That's my first position. Really, if you dig in from there, what I've argued is, look, we know that Democrats are obsessed with Russia. The Russia collusion hoax, everything for the past 6 years has been Russia, 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 and it's clouded our judgment. We need to be smart about what we're doing. Now, of course, we don't like that Russia invaded Ukraine, but the question becomes, what can we do about it? And there are a couple of separate ways, I think, in which the elites of this country, Democrats and Republicans, have fundamentally failed the American people in this moment. The first is that we have expended decades worth of supplies of American weapons on the Ukraine-Russia conflict when we don't make enough of that stuff on our own. We know the story. One of the reasons Donald Trump was elected in 2016 is we don't manufacture enough of our own stuff anymore. So we need to make more of our own stuff, but they've put us in this position where we don't do enough of it, so we don't make enough of our own stuff, and at the same time that we don't make enough of our own stuff, they want us to send all of our critical weapons overseas. Well, what happens, God forbid, if the Chinese invade Taiwan? What happens, God forbid, if there's a direct threat to American soil? We now no longer have the weapons in store to actually prosecute our own national security. Let's focus on our own problems. That's the first failure, Rob. And the second thing, if I may say, is the way that these guys have obsessively focused on the problems of Ukraine to the exclusion of everything else that's going on in our country. I have seen colleagues of mine, even Republican colleagues, who are much more emotionally invested in what's going on 6,000 miles away than they are in their own country. If the thing you care most about, we can agree to disagree on Ukraine. I imagine a lot of you agree with me, some of you don't. Yeah. But if the thing you care most about is a conflict 6,000 miles away, you should not be a leader of this country. Focus on our own country's problems.
And that was the crux of my question is, and especially that what you're describing is so evident in the Senate, I think, more than anywhere. It's what is that? Clarify what that is that exists inside of Washington. Why is it that when people go to Washington, they forget about the rest of the country? And that I think that all the wealth of this country exists inside of this bubble here in this city. And why is it that the rest of the world becomes so important and the domestic issues that we have go to the background? What happens when you get to Washington?
So here's what I think is going on, Rob. I think it's hard for these guys to psychologically accept that they have let the country become weaker on their watch. It was, of course, Donald Trump, a complete outsider to politics, who ran in 2016 saying, you people, the bipartisan consensus in this country has failed and we need something else. Now, of course, he was born, I believe, in the 1940s, so he's seen all of this happen, but he's seen it happen as an outsider with the recognition that new leadership needs to happen. Now, here, let me just give you an example here. So my family, obviously, we're all from Ohio, but I have a lot of family from eastern Kentucky, the Appalachian part of Kentucky. In the county that my grandparents were born in, the life expectancy in that county is 67. 67, that's comparable to a lot of third world countries. If you are a leader and you have allowed that to happen to your own country in your own backyard, if you're Mitch McConnell and you're a senator from Kentucky and you care more about the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine than about the fact that your own citizens are getting murdered by fentanyl brought in by cartels, and that's lowering life expectancy, you need to look in the mirror and accept that your job has been a failure. You've been a failure at your job of leadership.
And what is the diagnosis of that, though? What happens to them, though? Because there's no reason why that should be that way. That's what I don't understand.
The reason I think it's that way is because it's harder, it's easier to look at the problem 6,000 miles away, to look yourself in the mirror and accept that you've been a failure in leading your country over the past generation. Look, think about this. The bipartisan consensus over the last 40 years in this country, it's seen the rise of China, it's seen the destruction of the American manufacturing base, which is why we don't have enough weapons to send to Ukraine and also focus on ourselves. I mean, I'm the father of 3 little kids, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. Take your kids to a pharmacy today and be told that there's not enough amoxicillin for the kids of our own country because we let the communist Chinese make the antibiotics that we put into the bodies of our kids. This is a legacy of failure from these guys, and it's very hard for them to look themselves in the mirror and say, we screwed this up. And of course, the biggest screw up, the biggest problem we have right now is the American southern border. And if you're not focused on that, and you're not getting fired up about that, and you're not pulling all-nighters at the U.S. Senate about that, you're in the wrong job.
Can I ask you, that's a good point. I want to ask about the Senate border bill that, is gone through, that is, basically being held up in the House at this point. Johnson doesn't want to bring it to the floor. How did a bill like that get crafted? I mean, was there any actual concern? I mean, was it leadership that put it together? Was there any actual concern about the border, or was it just used as a ruse to get money for foreign wars? I mean, how did something like that happen?
Oh, how much time do we have, Rob? This is, we could go a long time on this. Here's basically what happened. So, any negotiation, we're divided government, right? Democrats control the presidency, Republicans control the House. The thought was, going into it, Republicans are divided about Ukraine, but we're united on border security. We want border security. Democrats are divided on, or are united on Ukraine. They're divided on border security. So there's the seed of a negotiation, a successful negotiation. The Democrats will give us border security, and then we'll give them money for Ukraine. Now, set to the side whether you like that negotiation, that was the way it was set up. The problem, Rob, is the border security was always fake. And I've heard from Democratic colleagues, I've heard from Democratic staffers who have said the Republican leadership in the Senate never pushed that hard for border security. There was always this kind of wink-wink. Well, we've got to go through the motions here. We've got to convince the conservative knuckle-draggers like J.D. Vance that we can care about border security, but we don't really care about it that much. So the American people got screwed in that deal.
So then they don't want a secure border.
Exactly. They at least care more about Ukraine than they do about border security in their own country. It was always a fig leaf. It was always the idea was, we're going to write another $61 billion to Ukraine, and we'll sort of, throw a bone to the people of CPAC and say we tried to do border security. But think about it. If you go into a negotiation saying, we don't actually care about the thing that we're allegedly negotiating over, you're not going to get anything, and that's exactly what happened over the last couple of weeks in Washington, D.C. It's a disgrace, and every person here should be pissed off about it.
That's exactly, I'm sure they are. And to clarify, when we're talking about you're not anti-Ukraine. You don't have an anti-Ukraine position. You don't want Ukraine to lose this war. They try and paint anybody that wants perhaps diplomacy in this situation, which is something on my show we talk about all the time. We talk about with Rick Grinnell all the time. Like, what happened to diplomacy the last 2 years of this war? Why is nobody fighting to figure out a way to end this war? Why is it just send more money, send more bullets, send more guns? Why is that the only option that we have here? Why is that the only option that they're willing to look at? Why is it that there's no Tony Blinken in the room trying to figure out a way to get out of this thing? It feels like they want the war.
It's all, Rob, I hate to say it, but I think it's all about the money. It's all about money for people who are getting, look, let's be honest, whether it's the reconstruction that will come to Ukraine hopefully soon, but maybe not for another couple of years, or whether it's the direct supply of resources, whether it's the corruption in the country, we know that a lot of money is getting skimmed off the top here. We don't know how much, we don't know exactly how it works, but we know there are real problems. And I think another thing that's going on, Rob, is that these people have convinced themselves, meaning the leadership of our country today, that diplomacy is a bad word. I remember when Donald Trump, maybe the most important thing he said during the campaign was, what's in America's interest is for the killing to stop. Like, such a simple insight, right? We want the killing to stop. We want energy prices to come down, food prices to come down. All of these things are made worse by a never-ending conflict in Eastern Europe. But these guys, if you talk about diplomacy, oh, you're a Putin shill. Where have we heard that from? We've heard that for the first 4 years of Donald Trump's administration, that he was a Putin shill, even though Vladimir Putin, the only time he didn't invade another country was when Donald Trump was president. It doesn't even pass the smell test, but these people have gotten themselves convinced that it's a bad word to engage in statesmanship. It's crazy, it's bad for the country, but it's where we are today.
It's the politics, it's so insidious.
Yes, it is.
It's so frustrating to, when the people in this room are paying attention, and most people aren't, which is why these stupid little games work the way they do. But if you're paying attention and you're watching this and you're seeing it, it's so frustrating to see that when you're just trying to do the right thing and you get painted as a certain way, they vilify people for just having a difference of opinion.
Yep.
I mean, that's the most dangerous thing. And in this country, we see that constantly, and they have complete control of the media narrative.
So It's funny, Rob. There are, I believe, 3 U.S. senators who are on a permanent lifetime ban list to Russia, and I'm one of them, right?
Oh.
So the mainstream press, the mainstream press calls me a Putin shill. I've never even talked to the guy. I don't get to go to Moscow to have the pierogies in Russia. Like, it's a lose-lose proposition for me. But of course, it's good for the country to have somebody saying, how long does this go on? How much money are we supposed to funnel into this country? And importantly, Rob, something needs to be said. You asked me, am I anti-Ukraine? Of course I'm not. In fact, I think these people are very brave. Most of them are just obviously good people who are trying to do the right thing. The average age for a soldier in the Ukrainian military right now is about 45 years old. Yeah. I'm 39. I was in the Marine Corps when I was 19 years old. That is not a healthy thing. So if you care about Ukraine, but most importantly, if you care about America, you should be wanting this thing to come to some diplomatic resolution. I think that's the only hope from here on out.
Zelensky's not pushing for that, though. I mean, that's the one thing that confuses a lot of people. His people are dying. I don't have any question that the guy loves his country. He wants to be in that country. He's a Ukrainian. He's letting his own people get killed on the field, and there's no push for an end.
So this is interesting, Rob. What Zelensky and a lot of folks in Ukraine have said, and I was in sort of Munich a couple of days ago, actually, the big national security confab, and I was pretty much the only person who believed the things that I do there. People said, well, you're on an island. I said, well, I'm on an island maybe in Munich, but I'm not on an island in the United States of America. The majority of the American people actually agree with my worldview here, and I think that's important. But what the leaders of Ukraine from Zelensky on down have said, that there was a negotiated peace to be had back in the early days of fighting. You know who prevented it? The Biden administration and Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. So I actually think that there was an opportunity for peace. I still think there's an opportunity for peace. You just have to get the wackos and the idiots out of the White House.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I want to talk about 2024 here for a moment. I mean, there's new polling out, it seems almost every day at this point. When you look even at the specific issues, former President Biden, I should say, is getting crushed. You look at specifically immigration, foreign policy, he's getting eviscerated. And people get excited, right? Because they think, oh, great, Trump has a great chance in the next election. That's wonderful. What I see and what I think terrifies me, if you look at a country that's been pulled for decades to the left, 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 you got to think long term. What I see is, that this next election is going to be competitive. It's not going to be a landslide. Look at what they're able to do to a country and still compete electorally and still compete for power. I mean, I've never seen, I could never have imagined that Biden was going to come in and just start dismantling every single thing that works about this country as fast as he can, and then somehow get to a point where, it's going to be close. I mean, you can look at the polls all you want, but damn well when that election comes down, it's going to be tight. It's going to come down to 4 or 5 states, and it's going to be close. How have we gotten to the point in this country where I almost feel like we're just full of guilt and self-loathing that we elect people that dismantle everything that we love about our country?
I think we have to be honest about 2 things, Rob. This is by design. So there are 2 major structural problems in the American Republic right now. The first is that we gave control over our entire information ecosystem to big technology companies that hate the values of the people in this room.
Yeah.
If you really want to have a free and fair election in 2024, the most important thing, break up Google, break up Google, and return power over the information economy to the American people. Just think about this. That's where 99% of people, regardless of their politics, get their information. We know now that it's completely dominated by left-wing radicals. It has a complete monopoly. I think it's illegal, by the way, to have that monopoly control over information. You go in and type in, did Donald Trump say such and such about immigration? Or is Joe Biden too old to be president of the United States? Well, the answer is yes, right? You don't need a Google search for that. But the results will be so biased and so corrupted in a left-wing direction. That's one of the reasons why we have major problems with our elections in this country. One other point, Rob, I didn't realize this until a few weeks ago. The immigration chaos, we talk about it all the time. We talk about the sex trafficking, these poor kids who are brought into this country by the cartels and sold into slavery. We, of course, talk about the fentanyl problem. The reason why we have a border crisis, it is by design. Biden is invading the country with people who he knows are going to vote disproportionately for Democrats. And this is an important point. Again, I didn't realize this until a few weeks ago. California has 5 more congressional representatives than it should. Do you know why? They count illegal aliens for purposes of assigning apportionment in Congress. So when these guys flood the country with millions of people who shouldn't be here, they destroy the voting power of citizens in our own republic. This is by design, and this is maybe the last very good chance we have to stop it in 2024.
It is something else. I want to finish off. I want to talk about Trump's legal woes. Obviously he still has a number of cases against him, but and again, we just talked about the polling shows Biden in a lot of trouble. Do you really think that they're going to try and throw this man in jail?
Absolutely. They're going to try with everything.
But will they be able to do it?
Absolutely not. I think the American people are too strong. We're too woken up to it. But look, I was thinking about this earlier because I serve, I have some success in the private sector before I got into Washington. That's unusual for most of my colleagues in the Senate from either side of the aisle. Most people in politics, think about this, from Nancy Pelosi's stock picking to others, they get richer from having served in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump is maybe the first politician in my lifetime who will be much poorer for having served his country. That is the best evidence that we should reelect him in 2024. He's actually sacrificed for this country in a way that's very unusual in politics. But because he actually does it for the right reasons, they're going to try to destroy him. And they've been trying to destroy him. What was the Russia collusion hoax? It was about destroying Donald Trump. This ridiculous New York fraud case, it's about destroying the guy's wealth before he re-enters the Oval Office. All of these lawfares, they're all about showing the American people that you can have the president you want, but we're going to try to destroy him if it's not approved by the elites of this country. It is why we have to renominate him for the folks in South Carolina who are voting tomorrow. We can't let the crazies and we can't let the judges determine who our nominee is. We decide who our nominee is, and we decide who our president is too.
Well said. Well said. I think we'll leave it there. Senator, thank you so much. We appreciate it. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys very much.
Great to have you.
Thank you. Good to see you.